Hey guys, I'm eating lunch. I feel a little bit better. I rearranged my desk so I don't have to rearrange my desk every time I want to do something. I have yarn over here. I have my iPad under my second monitor. I have my keyboard over here. I have my notepad in front of me. I have my microphone right here so I don't have to keep grabbing it and remembering to put it in front of me. Can you guys hear me okay? I think I've got it worked out now. So I don't have to move anything and I don't have to remember that I need to grab something and shuffle everything. I need a bigger desk is what I need. But that depends on my stepdaughters coming and getting all the crap out of that room. And I can buy my big L-shaped desk that I want. I can put in a nice big giant room in there and have lots of room to spread out. And now that my stepdaughters and I are getting along again, there's more of a chance of that happening. So, okay, I don't know if they're back yet. I have not checked. I was scrolling around YouTube trying to watch short videos to watch, but there was not anything short enough. By the time I got all settled down and comfortable again, it was like 8 minutes, and there was a 9 minute video I wanted to watch. What was it about? Oh, it was a body language video about Selena Gomez's meltdown. That she she took it down, but everybody grabbed it before she took it down, and now everybody's making videos about her meltdown. I feel sorry for her though. I really do. I understand her frustration. Like, she's half Mexican, right? So if she has family members that have been in this country illegally, I understand her frustration. Or friends, family or friends, whatever. I get it. She's upset. She shouldn't have taken it to social media though, because of who she is, you know? She should have known better. Okay. Enough of that, because we don't talk about that stuff on this channel. Anyway, you guys tell I'm feeling better? I'm still stuffy, but I'm feeling better. Okay, so um, let's get started. I swear I've not taken anything. I know I'm acting like I have. I've not. I'm just feeling better. I'm not taking anything. Not even cold medicine, which my husband doesn't understand why I don't take cold medicine. I have high blood pressure, so I don't take cold medicine unless I am feeling like death's door. Then I'll take cold medicine. Why do I have? Oh, I was gonna say I only had a black screen. I was like, why do I only have a black screen? It came up finally. When I first clicked on it, it was just a black screen. It doesn't look like they're back yet, unless my computer's doing that thing. It did that thing. I don't know why it does that. Seriously, why does it do that? They're there, but there's no sound yet. I don't pause it. I don't any of those things. It does it all the time. And I don't think that's an internet issue. I don't know what it's doing. Because I've done that before. I've been sitting here talking and we've been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and nothing happens. And then I look at it and I'm like, it's just not doing anything. And it's not buffering. It's just, I don't know. I don't know what it's doing. But I caught it this time before we sat here and waited forever before I realized it. So we're good to go. Let's go. I'm going to turn my camera off so it doesn't crash, and also because I'm eating lunch. Come on.
You may
StreamYard.
be seated.
And now StreamYard.
Mr. Levine?
Your Honor, the state will call Corporal Joella Moore with the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office.
I think he's proven that the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office was checking in on this.
Step right here, raise your right hand for you.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth? Sorry, guys.
Corporal Moore, good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your name for the record?
I'm Corporal Joella Moore, Joella, last name Moore.
And how long have you been employed in law enforcement?
I've been in law enforcement 24 years. I've been with Charlotte County Sheriff's Office a little shy of 23 years.
And what are some of the different units that you've worked in law enforcement?
I worked in corrections as a correction deputy. I worked road patrol. I was a school resource officer. I worked our street crimes unit. Then I was promoted, and I went back to road patrol. Currently, I'm a corporal over our juvenile unit, and I also worked intel as a juvenile intervention detective.
So tell the jury a little bit about your kind of specialty or specialized knowledge about interacting with juveniles as it pertains to criminal justice system and in life in general.
So the majority of my adult life has been working with at-risk kids. Prior to law enforcement, I worked in Oregon under the Special Education Department, working with at-risk kids, severely emotionally disturbed, ages 13 to 18. I moved here to Florida to take care of my grandparents and came into law enforcement. Quickly ended up as a school resource officer. Like I had said, did that for the majority of my career at Charlotte County. And then went to the juvenile intervention detective, which works with the most at-risk kids. And currently now I'm back overseeing the juvenile unit where I started.
Now, how was it that you first became acquainted with Colin Griffith and his mom, Kathy Griffith?
We were in a transition as I got promoted to the juvenile, from the juvenile intervention detective position to corporal for road patrol. I worked with our new juvenile intervention detective Zinioni, and Corporal Rentis. So we were still in the transition of, they would ask me questions about kids and some resources that we have that they may not have had knowledge to. And Colin came up in that.
Did the defendant appear to be comfortable talking to you and to Lacey and Rentis?
Yes.
Now, did you have an opportunity to respond to the Griffith household in Port Charlotte November 13th of 2023?
Yes,
in
sir.
relationship to the domestic violence battery investigation?
Yes, sir.
Now, did you and your fellow deputies have body cam footage? Body cam on so that it produced footage?
Yes, sir.
And is one of the deputies that also responded with you at different times Deputy Jankowski?
Yes, sir. I was his supervisor.
And I understand he has a SUV, is that correct? Or he did back when this happened, law enforcement vehicle?
Yes, sir.
And in the back, is there something called an in-car camera?
Yes, sir.
And does that basically record video and audio of whoever's in the back seat of a car?
Yes, sir.
And on the specific date, November 13th, including 10:26 p.m. of November 13th, 2023, as well as after midnight, November 14th, 2023 at 2 a.m. And thereafter, would Deputy Jankowski's in-car camera just be continuously running?
They're activated when we turn them on, or they can be activated. All of our body cameras will be activated if our firearms are pulled, if our tasers are utilized, or in that general facility, if another officer's equipment has been pulled. That way we can capture everything. So we have these automatic safeguards that'll signal the activation of our cameras, the lights on our patrol car. Right, if we turn our lights on, they automatically kick in, or we can manually turn them on.
At some point during the night, was the defendant arrested for DV battery on his mom?
Yes, sir.
And at some point during the night, was he put in the back of Jankowski's vehicle?
Yes, sir.
And did Jankowski's in-car video capture the defendant talking in the backseat of the car?
Yes, sir.
Now, there's been a name mentioned, Corporal Rentis, who's now Sergeant Rentis. What was his relationship to the defendant?
He had a close relationship with the defendant and the family, and would frequently speak to him or have communications if they were having trouble to try to resolve or give resources to the family.
And on the in-car camera, is the defendant have access to a cell phone on his lap?
Yes, sir.
And describe to the jury how that came about.
I had received a phone call from Corporal Rentis, who was actively on the phone with the defendant. Rentis had told me that there was some type of disturbance over at the house. So I responded over there, notified Central that I had just received a phone call from Corporal Rentis. At the time, he's since been promoted. I'll refer to him as Corporal Rentis so it doesn't get confusing. And so we responded over there, and Corporal Rentis maintained phone contact with Colton.
At certain times, would you appear at the side of Jankowski's SUV and interact with the defendant?
Yes, sir. So whenever we have a person in the back of our patrol car, we monitor them, keep them within ear and eye, so we can hear what's going on and see them in case there's some type of an emergency or if they need assistance. So we don't have to stand necessarily right there all the time, but we have to be able to hear them if they need assistance.
And in terms of the state exhibits 191, 192, and 193, all being in-car videos from Jankowski on November 14th. Actually, it looks like they're all from the early morning hours of November 14th. Have you had an opportunity at some time to watch the in-car camera footage?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, this time the state would move State Exhibit 191, 192, and 193 into evidence.
Any objection?
We'll start with 191. And before, as we get that queued up, was there some subject matter in which the defendant was talking about kind of two different personas, Colin 1 and Colin 2?
Yes, sir.
What? This is the first we've heard about that.
I'll say it to you like this, if you want to know. Colin 1 is, I guess, he's who just wants to survive, help people, and do good things in the world. And Colin 2 is the one that protects Colin 1 in situations where he can't escape from. And Colin 2 is the one that killed someone. But you're talking to Colin one. Talking to Colin one. The one who just wants to help people and just wants to.
Wait, are we talking
So
about?
is that the cell phone that's visible on the defendant's lap?
Yes, sir.
And he's talking to Corporal Rentis?
Yes, sir.
Next, we'll segue to 192.
Wait, are we talking
Oh, and
about
for the
right
record, that
here?
was, if you could turn that back on, John. Thank you. So we can see the time and the date.
Rentis, oh,
3 at 1:59 a.m. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. The state will next publish 192.
I need to figure out exactly what you're scared of without having you descriptive and you give me some sense of stuff. Scared of going back in there, Rentis. Jesus, how many times do I gotta say it? That's all I'm scared of. That's it. I'm fucking scared of that call. Yes, I am, Rentis, because what's it gonna come down to next time? Colin, I don't think you're a pussy. I think that you are capable of killing your mother, but I don't think that you will. No, why would I let you get to that?
Hold up a minute. Who was he on the phone with? He's on the phone with the other corporal. Then why is she the one that's verifying this call? Why isn't the other corporal verifying the call if he was the one that spoke with him? That doesn't make sense.
Do you think Colin will let you get to that? I can't hear you, sorry. Why call me strong that visual allows you submit in a roundabout way? Should call it to when we talk about it's the strongest version of me.
Did you hear more the defendant saying, yeah, he would, as it pertains to Colin 1 allowing him to kill his mom?
I did, sir.
And that is on November 14th, 2023 at about 2:21 in the morning.
Yes, sir.
And for the final clip will be State Exhibit 193.
I don't know how I'm gonna react when she does that again. If I can control myself or how that's gonna happen.
What do you think you might do to her
If she tries to hit me again, I might hit her back really, really hardly and badly.
You got her?
For the record, that was not November 14th, 2023 at 3:22 a.m.
Yes, sir.
So at the end of that investigation, is it a fair statement the defendant was arrested?
Yes, sir.
Corporal Moore, I don't have any further questions for you.
Cross.
Good afternoon.
Corporal Moore, every time that Colin said, either in your presence or on the camera footage that you've reviewed, that he might hurt his mom or he was afraid he would hurt his mom, he prefaced that statement by saying, if she hits me, or if she comes at me, or if she attacks me, I'm afraid I'll hurt her. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So he never said, I just want to kill my mom for no reason whatsoever.
No, ma'am.
Don't think I have any other questions. Oh, Colin told you that night that his mom had punched him before he threw her on the ground, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Redirect.
Nothing further.
Is the witness released?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Deputy Joseph Jankowski of the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office.
This one. Step right here, raise your right hand. I did. This one.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Deputy Jankowski, can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
I'm Deputy Jankowski with the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office.
Tell the jury about your education and training and experience.
So I went to the police academy. I've done multiple specialty classes like speed and measurement, as well as narcotics and dangerous drugs. I'm a pit instructor for the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office. I currently work on the road patrol, so you call 911 in my area. I'm the one showing up.
Now, I want to direct your attention specifically to this case as it pertains to the defendant. Did you have an opportunity to respond to address in Fort Charlotte as part of a domestic violence battery investigation?
I did.
And at the time, were you a field training officer of another one of the deputies who was present?
I was.
And who were you supervising?
I was training Deputy Shark.
And were you basically overseeing him and allowing him to do his part of the investigation?
Correct.
What was your role in the investigation?
So I was overseeing, so he was in his final phases of training. So I let him do his investigation. I'm there to guide him if he has questions or to help him along if he gets stuck in a certain situation.
Now, while you were doing that, did you have your body cam going?
I did.
When the investigation was kind of coming to an end, were you inside with Kathy Griffith and her mom, Susan Detman, in the living room area?
I was.
And were you asking certain questions that pertains to domestic violence within the household?
I did.
Your Honor, the state at this time would move State Exhibit 189 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
Will be received.
I just need one moment, Your Honor. Thanks, John. And before we play it, would this, is it a fair statement that the defendant at this time is outside, either in the back of your patrol vehicle or somewhere else?
That is correct.
So the only two people present, civilian-wise, would be the victim, Kathy Griffith, and her mother?
That's correct.
A couple of quick yes or no questions I almost forgot before we go. And do you think he's capable of killing you?
Yes.
Does he have access to a firearm? And all right. Any other questions before we? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your time.
So when you ask, do you think he's capable of killing you, was her response yes?
Yes, it was.
And then in the back of your patrol vehicle, for the record, that was from around November 13th, 2023 at 10:26 p.m. Excuse me, at 10:20 p.m. This next video, 190, from the back of your vehicle will be at November 13th, the same day at 10:26 p.m.
That's not in evidence yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, Your Honor. Let me ask you a couple questions about that. Now, as you return to your vehicle, did your body cam capture a little bit of a conversation between Susan Detman, who was standing outside of your patrol vehicle as she spoke with her grandson, the defendant?
It did.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move State Exhibit 190 into evidence.
Stupid chair.
Will be received.
And
Doesn't
with
wanna
the court's
roll.
permission, we'll play it for the jury. Thank you.
What are they playing? I missed it. I had to go take care of the dogs.
Why did you stand up? And why did you say?
So I'm sure I had a face-to-face conversation.
No, you didn't. You stood up and said, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. Yes, you did. I was there.
I was saying, no, I'm not a psychopath. I'm not this murderer. I'm just trying to peacefully coexist, helping out. She kept telling me to shut up, but when I wouldn't shut up, she hit me.
No, that's not what happened, Colin. That's not what happened. You never said you wanted to peacefully coexist.
I've been saying that.
You said that in the car, but not there with her.
Deputy, towards the beginning of that clip, did you hear the defendant say, "I'm not a psychopath"? Mom, I'm not a psychopath. I'm not this murderer.
I did.
Deputy Jankowski, I have no further questions for you. Cross.
Good afternoon.
Colin was in the back of, was that your car or was that somebody else's car?
That was my car.
For over 5 hours that night, wasn't he?
I don't know the exact time frame. That doesn't sound right.
Well, one of the camera clips we've seen was from like 10 p.m. on.
yeah, it does sound like they're totally ignoring that his mom had some issues, because she wanted him out and then she wanted him back in. Like, she would kick him out and then call the police and report him as a runaway and want him back. So this was a double-sided thing. Like, this wasn't just a bad kid that killed his mom. This is not as cut and dried as the public was led to believe. This mother had issues big time. And yeah, I want to hear what DCF has to say too. I don't know if the prosecution is going to call DCF, but maybe the defense will. Because DCF, I mean, they've taken her kids away from her before, so they certainly have got to have some sort of insight into the family dynamics, more so than I think the police would have. Because and she was 13 when she got pregnant with her first kid. So what does that say about the way she was parented? I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking the whole thing. The whole family has issues.
On the 13th. And then the last one from your car was 2:30 or so on the 14th, 2:30 a.m. So sorry, 4.5 hours. Does that sound about right?
I couldn't say for sure. It sounds like a long period of time for someone that was arrested for battery to sit in the back of a car for 4 hours to me.
Is it fair to say that this investigation took a long time?
It did take a reasonable amount of time.
I'm not saying that anybody delayed anything. I'm just saying that it wasn't a quick, we can determine exactly what happened right away kind of thing, was it?
No, because people had conflicting stories.
Right. That last little bit, that clip that showed part of a conversation between Susan Detman and Colin. Colin said that his mom had called him a psychopath and a murderer, right?
I know Colin stated in that clip, I'm not a psychopath. I'm not this murderer, if I'm quoting it correctly.
But he said that I told my mom that I'm not that, correct? Implying that she had called him those things.
I know he said the word mom before he made that statement.
Did you ever ask Kathy whether she called him those names?
No.
Thank you.
Redirect.
Nothing further.
Witness release.
Yes.
Norcom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next witness. Your Honor, the State calls Detective Danny Peters with the Polk County Sheriff's Office.
What? Spike, you're getting on my last nerve. I'm gonna send you to Aunt Judy. No, I can't. She's fixing to go on a cruise. When she gets back from her cruise, I'm gonna send you to Aunt Judy's house. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? What? I need to watch the trial. What?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
What?
All right, thank you. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, Danny Peters, Danny Peters, detective with the Polk County Sheriff's Office.
And what division do you work in?
I'm with the Homicide Division.
In this case, are you the case agent, the lead detective?
I am.
Tell the jury about your education, training, and experience.
In 2010, I went to the Basic Law Enforcement Academy. Upon graduation, I was hired by the Polk County Sheriff's Office, where I've spent 14 years, most of them in investigations, and led me to this point.
Now, when you investigated this case, had you been in the homicide division for a certain period of time?
Just several years.
And have you investigated countless homicides?
Yes.
How did you first get called out to this case?
We were notified by supervision to respond to a death investigation.
And do you recall approximately what time you arrived on scene?
7:25 approximately.
And was that actually to the crime scene, the residence?
Yes, sir.
And that's in Polk County?
Yes.
Describe to the jury kind of your mentality as a homicide detective when you get to a scene. What's it like?
Well, initially when you get to a scene, it's a little chaotic. You make contact with deputies on scene, and you learn what they responded to and what they heard upon their arrival.
Now, about how many detectives might be working a case, like this case in particular? How many detectives were working at the same time you were? Or was it multiple detectives?
Multiple detectives. We had more than 5.
And do each one of you kind of have multiple things that you're investigating?
Yes, we have different tasks when we're on scene.
And then how do you get updates from each other to see where the investigation is at or where it's headed?
So through the course of the investigation, we tend to come together and brief each other in reference to what we've learned, any evidence we've obtained. We call each other on our cell phones and explain where we're at and what we're doing.
What's the crime scene / forensic investigators' role at a scene?
They're to arrive and preserve evidence for us, document evidence.
And I take it they were present the night of?
Yes, sir.
And do they kind of work on their own, or are you as the lead detective telling them what to do or what to look for? How does that work?
No, so as a detective, I give them direction in reference to stuff that I'm looking for or things that I need, as well as the other detectives on scene also give them instructions.
So when you show up on scene, do you know where the defendant was?
From what I was told, the defendant was in the back of a patrol car.
So is it a fair statement you were not interacting with him at that time, but rather were then surveying the scene?
Correct.
Describe to the jury what you did.
So upon arriving, I made contact with the initial deputy who briefed me of what he encountered upon arriving. And then once I learned that information, we made contact with the medical examiner to explain exactly what it was that we had on scene. And the grandmother arrived on scene, and then we began to do our interviews.
Did you have an opportunity to actually speak and interview the grandmother, Susan Detman, that evening?
I did.
And was that a one-time thing, or did you interview her any additional times after the night of September 8th?
Yeah, I interviewed her again after the initial night we were on scene, yes.
Now, and she was / is the owner of that house, correct?
Yes.
Did you have an opportunity to go inside the house to see what was going on inside?
I did.
And was Kathy's body still there when you were there?
It was.
Now, you mentioned that you spoke to the medical examiner. In this case, did you speak to Dr. Garavan?
Yes, it was Dr. Garavan that was the on-call medical examiner, yes.
And explain to the jury about why you called him and what you were hoping to learn from.
So I explained to him the manner in which we found the decedent and the severity of her injuries. And he was giving me an explanation of the probability of what may or may not have happened.
Would the medical examiner then the next day do an autopsy?
Yes, he did.
What did you notice that caught your attention about the crime scene, both outside and inside?
Well, I noticed it was well organized. It was clean. Outside, the victim and the defendant's vehicles were parked at the residence. And then inside was very organized.
Did it appear that there had been a long, drawn-out fight of any type?
No.
Now, as part of any homicide investigation, do you obtain evidence from cell phones?
We do, yes.
Now, when there's a cell phone of interest or that may be relevant for a certain investigation, do you have professionals who are able to do forensic downloads?
We do. We have detectives that work for the Polk County Sheriff's Office that handle the downloads for us, yes.
Tell us a little bit about what they do to accomplish that.
So they use programs such as Cellbrite to hook the phones or devices up that we take into our possession. And then once they hook these devices up, it starts to download the data off of those devices. And then they are able to attach it to like a USB or a CD and provide it to us. And then we are able to see what's on that device.
Sometimes are there limitations to what can be obtained from a cell phone?
Yes.
Sometimes are you guys able to get basically a full copy for copy, meaning whatever was on the cell phone, you can get all the information off the cell phone?
Yes.
Sometimes are you able to only get partial information from a cell phone?
Yes.
And does that basically just have to do with technology or some type of impediment to getting further information from a cell phone?
Yes. It depends on whether or not the program has downloaded or has reached a certain spec for that phone or computer.
Now, can a similar logistics be taken care of on a computer as well, downloading information off of a computer?
Yes.
Now, in this particular case, did you obtain cell phones from the defendant?
Yes.
You or somebody from your agency, of course?
Yes. I had another detective on scene with me that was able to get that cell phone.
And the defendant's cell phone came from his car, is that correct?
His car, yes.
And were you able to obtain the victim's cell phone, Kathy's cell phone?
Yes, we were.
And was that from the island in the kitchen?
It was in the kitchen, yes.
And then were you able to obtain the phone?
Yes.
And did she basically consent or allow that to happen?
Yes, she provided full consent to search her cell phone, written permission as well.
Now, were you able to get information / the downloads from Susan's phone?
Yes.
What about from the defendant's phone?
Yes, I was.
And what about from Kathy's phone?
Catherine's phone, not so much. It was a newer type phone that the program was not able to do a full download. So we sent that cell phone off to Homeland Security, where they have more advanced equipment, and they are in the process as we speak of attempting to download that cell phone for us.
At some time during your investigation, did somebody bring you Kathy's computer?
Yes.
Personal computer.
Yes.
And who brought you that?
That was her oldest son, Christopher.
And is that also the defendant's older brother?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately how many years older Christopher is than his brother, the defendant?
A couple, maybe 4, I believe.
Now, as it pertains to this case, it was Christopher Griffith, not totally irrelevant, but was he kind of had nothing to do with this case?
Yeah, he didn't have anything to do up to that point.
Now, when you obtained the computer through him bringing his mom's computer in, did you have your people attempt to get a download from the computer?
Yes.
And what happened?
We were not able to access the computer.
Do you know why?
Based upon the passwords or the protection it had on the computer, wouldn't allow us to do a full download.
Sometimes are computers and/or cell phones difficult or impossible to get into?
Yes.
Sometimes does it have to do with whether you have a password or what make of the technology it is?
Yes.
So even though you weren't able to get into Kathy's phone, is it a fair statement that you were able to see a lot of her activity through the defendant's phone and Susan's phone?
Yeah, I was able to see all activity that she had through the defendant's phone and her mother's phone. Yes.
So, for instance, if Kathy texted her son or texted her mom, you'd be able to read those text messages as if you had Kathy's phone, correct?
Correct.
And any photographs sent back and forth or call off?
Yes.
So it was.
Yes, it was.
Now, during your investigation of the different cell phones, did you come across photographs of the defendant and his mom and Susan?
I did.
In terms of the positives of the family dynamics, what did you learn about from the photographs? What did you learn about that relationship between the defendant and his mom and Susan?
Well, just by the photographs, they appeared to be a happy family. Looked like they traveled a lot, visited a lot of locations, Disney World, cruises, the White House. It looked like they were happy.
Yeah, it looks.
Detective Peters, did you have an opportunity to see a series of photographs in the form of, we'll start with 171, 171A, and 171B?
Yes.
And what about photographs 172 through 178 and 178A through 178I?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move those mentioned exhibits into evidence. And with the court's permission, we'll publish those photographs. We could go first to 171.
The age of social media, where you make your family look perfect when it's
What did you learn from that
broken
picture?
on the inside.
Looks like they took a selfie, the victim and the defendant, maybe on a cruise. Looks happy.
171A.
Looks like a mother and son happy taking a photograph.
171B.
Selfie, mother and son happy, smiling.
And in that photograph, does it appear that Kathy has AirPods in her ears
Yes, it does.
and they're white in color?
Yeah.
We'll continue on to 172.
It's a nice photo. Looks like a mother and son happy there.
And through the Cellbrite report, were you able to determine some of the dates of the originations of the photographs, that being in 2023 and 2024 throughout the different months?
Yes, sir.
Continuing on, 173. Who's pictured in the middle between Kathy and her son?
That is Susan Detman. That's the grandmother and the mother of the victim.
Would she periodically travel with them as well, do you know?
Yes.
174, 175, 176, 177, 178, 178A, and 178B. So far, these pictures, is it a fair statement that it's showing different locales and different places that mother and son had been together?
Yes.
178C. And it looks like they're in some type of courtroom or courtroom setup. Is that correct?
It looks that way, yes.
this
She took
circular
selfies.
seal there, maybe you can see it on your computer. What is this?
This is all.
No? All right, no worries. It's not working. Looks like it says, well, it does say Stetson University College of Law.
Oh,
And once again, when there's a third person in these photos, is that Susan?
Yes.
178D. Does that look like it's at Disney or outside of Disney?
Yes, it does.
And for the purposes of the record, in a lot of these pictures, both the defendant and his mom appear smiling and happy. Is that correct?
Yes.
178E, 178F, 178G. Where does that look like it's taken?
Looks like it's taken at the Capitol in Washington.
178
at 8
Next.
Capitol?
H, and then 178I. All right, thanks, John. So some of those photos were from, according to the Cellbrite report, correct me if I'm wrong, were from as early as April of 2023, looking like it went until June of 2024.
Yes.
Now, Detective Peters, did you find out that Kathy had Ring video capabilities inside her residence?
I did.
Was it both inside and outside?
Yes.
And describe to the jury some of the camera locations and what vantage point that provide.
So there were 4 total Ring cameras that I gained access to. One was the doorbell that was outside. One was in the living room that encompasses the whole entirety of the living room. One was in the kitchen. One was in the victim's room, her bedroom, and one was in the defendant's bedroom.
Did you find that a little bit odd that there were so many cameras in so many locations within someone's private residence?
Initially, I did, yes.
And based on your investigation, were you able to determine why there were cameras inside?
Yes.
And what was the reason?
His mother was a...
Are you, without answering the question, but are you speculating or do you know from your investigation?
Judge, I'm going to object. I think I know where this is going.
You know, when I was a kid, I got disciplined. I got sent to my room. I got spanked. I got grounded. You name it. Then I didn't have kids. I had a career first and I got married later in life. But I had a friend that had kids, and they were taught in school, if your mom touches you in any way that slap, hit, leaves any kind of mark, you can call the cops on her. So my friend got afraid to touch her kids because they were threatening her all the time. Don't you touch me, I'm going to call the cops. Her daughter got pregnant when she was 15 because she was stinking out at night. And she was like, what am I supposed to do, Debbie? Handcuff her to the bed? I said, yeah, if you have to. And she's like,
All right, thank you, Anna.
call the cops on me.
During your investigation, were you able to obtain Ring camera footage from the interior?
Hang on, let me finish my thought. So, that was in the 90s. So, you go from the 80s when I was growing up, I got punished, to the 90s where kids are taught in school, if your parent touches you, you can call the cops on them. And then now, in the 2000s, you got kids killing their parents left and right. I mean, look at Carly Gregg. And I'm seeing videos on YouTube all the time about kids killing their parents. It's like a slippery slope. You tell the kids, oh, your parents can't touch you. And it's a slippery slope. It's gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. Just an observation. I don't know that it means anything. It's just an observation. But back in the day, when parents were allowed to discipline their children, you never heard of parents getting killed by their kids. Do you think it's just because it's reported more? Or do you think because it's happening more? Maybe it's just reported more. That could be it. I don't know. Just an observation, but it could be just that it's reported more. That's possible.
Interior of the house.
I was.
And is that like a consistent 24/7 recording, or is it something else?
The times and the stamps were based upon movement.
So is there plenty of times when people are doing nothing of significance, such as moving around the house or just having regular conversations, things of that nature?
Oh, yeah. A lot of the times it was like that.
If the jury, if during this trial I put on every single minute of Ring camera footage in existence, would we be here for hundreds of hours?
Yeah, days.
All right. Now,
oh, wow.
Was one of the rooms that you were able to get camera footage from, the camera set up somewhere in the kitchen?
Yes.
And would that point out to capture both the kitchen and then the living room that's behind the kitchen?
Yes.
And then was there a similar camera in the living room that pointed out to the living room and then behind the living room, the kitchen?
Yes.
And is there a lot of, like, audio wise, is it a fair statement that there's a lot of things that you can hear clearly?
Yes.
And then are there some things that you just can't hear too clearly?
Some things are muffled, yes.
Have you had an opportunity to, of course, provide all that Ring kitchen video footage?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Let me repeat that. The Ring video footage that you provided, have there been 2 exhibits prepared by me?
Yes.
All right. And do those represent September 7th of 2024 and September 8th of 2024?
Yes.
And for the record, Your Honor, that's State Exhibit 197 from the September 7th, 2024 date, and Exhibit number 198 from September 8th of 2024. What's the significance of September 8th, 2024?
There is a lot of dialogue back and forth between the victim and her mother and her attempts to make contact with the defendant.
And was that the date that she was ultimately killed?
Yes, it was.
That would be a Sunday?
Yes.
And on the September 8th video clips, is it a fair statement that the defendant is not in them because he's not present at the house?
Correct.
Were you able to determine the last day that he was at the house?
Yes.
Go ahead. What day was that?
It was September 7th.
Does September 7th capture some of his interaction with his mom?
It does.
Now, during your investigation, did you come into contact with the name Jeffrey Rapkin?
I did, yes.
And who was that?
He is the attorney for Colin.
As it pertained to the DV battery case and maybe some family law logistics?
Correct. I learned that he was appointed his attorney. They hired him for the domestic violence case from November of the previous year.
And was there many conversations in text format between the defendant and Jeffrey Rapkin?
Yes.
Was there also conversations between Susan Detman and Jeffrey Rapkin?
Yes, there were.
Now, as surrounding circumstances of how that came to your attention?
Yeah, looking through the grandmother's phone download, I observed it in her photographs.
All right, so when you click on it, it basically blows up in size to look like a business card?
Correct.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move State Exhibit 187 into evidence. Now, based upon that, were you able to determine that the attorney was based out of Port Charlotte?
Yes.
And also Port Charlotte is the city where Kathy resided with her son?
Yes.
Also, were you able to figure out that the phone number 941-916-4096 was the cell phone number of Jeffrey Rapkin?
Yes.
And was that number the number that the defendant would communicate with via text message?
Yes, it was.
Was there a certain time, Detective Peters, when that phone number of Jeffrey Rapkin was in the defendant's phone, and at the top of the phone where somebody's either phone number or contact would be, it was the actual 10-digit phone number?
Yeah, just the phone number. Yes.
And then at a certain point, was that phone number saved into the defendant's phone so it said Jeff Rapkin or Jeffrey Rapkin? But either way, it was always the same phone number, that being Jeffrey Rapkin's phone number, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And were you able to determine that through the many conversations that there would be points when Jeffrey Rapkin would address the defendant as like Colin, blah, 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 or he would make comments and then say Colin to make it explicitly clear who the two people communicating were?
Yes.
That is surprising.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between Kathy Griffith and her son, Colin Griffith. With a yes or no response, if possible. Was there an extended period of time, like approximately 3 years or so, where the defendant was living with his dad out of state?
Yes.
And at that point, did Kathy have limited or basically not much at all contact with her son?
Limited contact with her son, yes.
And did it appear from your investigation that she wanted to have a lot more?
Yes.
But that the defendant's father was difficult, to say the least?
I don't have proof that the defendant's father was difficult. have conversations between Colin and his mother while he lived in Oklahoma, and it did not appear as if it was a difficult situation to communicate with him. No.
All right. Now, at a certain point, did the defendant come to live with his mom?
Yes.
Now, at that point, had she basically missed out, and the defendant had missed out on about 3 years of relationship, mother-son relationship?
Yes.
Did they live in the Port Charlotte house basically up until this incident happened?
Yes.
Now, were you able to determine that did the defendant have his own bedroom at his house?
He did.
And did it appear that he knew the defendant, that there were Ring cameras in the household?
It did appear that way, yes.
And tell the jury about the things that indicated that.
When he would walk in a room where there was a camera, he would look directly into the camera.
And the cameras themselves, are they like hidden in something?
No, they're in plain view.
What cell phone service did Kathy and Colin have?
They had AT&T.
And in order to have AT&T cell phone service, how old do you have to be?
18 years or older to purchase your own line or plan through AT&T.
Judge, I'm going to object to the foundation. I'm not sure how he has this information.
Play the appropriate predicate.
Now, how were you able to determine that Kathy had AT&T?
We have analysts that work with us through the course of our investigation that are able to determine through their programs that they utilize, phone numbers that we give them that provide them with that information.
And during the phone forensic investigation, are there various screenshots that Kathy sent to, at least to Susan, maybe to the defendant as well, that basically said AT&T.com phone records with call history?
Yes. Yes.
Now, in the Ring video footage, is it apparent sometimes that the defendant is walking around with his cell phone that his mom provided?
Yes.
And then that cell
That his mom provided, there's been no evidence.
Did his mom provide him a cell phone?
Object as to knowledge, foundation.
Well, he either knows or doesn't know.
You're gonna lay the predicate.
Okay. Are you aware from your investigation that the defendant's mom provided him a cell phone?
Yes.
Now,
It's the same. It's the same.
how,
We had this discussion.
could you explain how you determine it?
Through the video, she has access to a cell phone and advised in numerous videos that she was cutting off his service.
But Judge, that still doesn't approach.
Bad part about being caught up to the live is you can't fast forward through sidebars. Sidebar. I don't understand why this is a problem. Why does it matter? whether or not she gave him the cell phone. She wanted to control him. Of course she gave him a cell phone so she could keep tabs on him. My life, let me just tell y'all, my mom was controlling. She beat me down to the point that I would have never stood up to her no matter what. So I feel for this kid because my mom wasn't that bad, but my mom was bad. So I feel for this kid. I guarantee you, had there been cell phones back in the day when I was his age, I would have been miserable because my mom would have been calling me when I went somewhere every 15 minutes, wanting to know where I was, what I was doing. I guarantee you, I would have had a miserable existence. I would have had a cell phone. It would have been on her bill. She would be able to see every call I made. She would have known who I was talking to. She would have been watching the GPS, seeing where I was going. Ugh, it would have been horrendous. Horrible. So I don't see why they need foundation for this, because I 100% guarantee that it is not a stretch that this woman got him a cell phone to keep track of him. I don't see the big deal. Maybe she sees where he's going with this. And later there's going to be a question that is going to hurt her case regarding a cell phone. But I don't see what the big deal is right now. Of course she got him a cell phone. It's a tracker. I can remember when I was a kid going to a friend's house and we would go places we weren't supposed to go, but we would have to go back to my friend's house by midnight because I was supposed to call my mom at midnight and I had to be back at my friend's house so the caller ID would show up that I was at my friend's house. And then after I called her at midnight, then we'd go back and do whatever we were doing. If I had a cell phone back then, my life would not have been.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to step into the jury room for a few minutes while we get some electronic equipment fixed and I address the matter with the lawyers.
All rise, please.
However, now as an adult, if my kid did what I did, I mean, serious. That's the only really bad, well, one of the only really bad things I did. I did a couple of bad things. I did a lot of them.
All right, Mr. Levine, if you would conduct a proffer.
You said to go ahead, Your Honor?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, we're going to try to get this fixed out while we're doing this.
Oh yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Detective Peters, were you able to establish that you were mentioning earlier about your analysts can pull up the phone number and then see the corresponding who the phone provider is. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you had access to the defendant's phone number and to Kathy's phone number, correct?
Yes.
As it pertained to that.
Yes.
And were you able to determine who the provider was?
AT&T.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but before the break, what was it that you were answering, subject matter wise?
How I knew that Kathy had purchased the phone for him.
All right, I'm going to ask you some specific.
That's the way it was in the 70s when I was little, when we would be out bike riding or skating or whatever out in the streets outside playing, just in the neighborhood. When it got dark, you went home. But when I was I was talking about when I was a teenager, like, because we lived like 20 minutes from Gainesville then, because I lived in a different town, but it was like still adjacent to Gainesville. So we would go to Gainesville and like meet guys and stuff. And yeah, my mom would have killed me if she knew that I was doing that. Would have killed me.
Specific questions about that subject matter.
Okay.
Now, the judge has heard at a prior hearing earlier this month, but so the record's clear during this trial. Do you recall that there were 3 photographs that were sent from Kathy to her mother Susan that were related to this Jeffrey Rapkin text message between the defendant and Jeffrey Rapkin subject matter?
There were.
And was the date February 19th of 2023 that it showed up on Susan's phone?
Yes, that's the stamped date in her photographs.
And those photographs, were those photographs of what appeared to be the defendant's actual phone?
Yes.
And in order for that to happen, that would mean that Kathy would have had the defendant's actual phone and the phone was open, correct?
Correct.
So the defendant's cell phone screen was visible with the defendant's content open, correct?
Yes.
And in those 3 photographs, is it a fair statement that Kathy has taken a picture of the defendant's open cell phone?
Yes.
One of those photographs has to do with the subject matter that the judge heard middle of January as it pertains to the defendant talking about giving his mom the old knife to the neck from behind routine.
Correct.
Another one of those photographs has to do with Jeffrey Rapkin talking about how well versed in the law the defendant is, correct?
Correct.
And Jeffrey Rapkin addresses the defendant by saying his actual name, Colin, correct?
Yes.
On one or more occasions in those 2 text messages, correct?
Correct.
The third photograph that was also sent on that, or that was also showed up on Susan's phone on that same February 19th of 2023 date, was that another photograph of the defendant in text messaging Jeffrey Rapkin.
Yes.
And those 3 photographs had Jeffrey Rapkin's phone number at the top, correct? So it was clear. I mean, the phone number that the defendant was communicating with was Jeffrey Rapkin's phone number, correct?
Right. The first one, Jeffrey Rapkin's name.
And when somebody initially calls someone, if they're not saved under a name, it'll be the phone number that they call them at, correct?
Correct.
Or text them at?
Correct.
And if someone takes the time to, over the course of a relationship, take the time to type in the person's name, it's still the same phone number, but now it'll be associated with just a printed name.
Right. You're in established contact at that point.
But other than the established phone number remained the same, it was Jeffrey Rapkin.
Yes.
And he and the defendant would communicate, and Jeffrey Rapkin would say Colin a lot, like either Colin and make a statement or make a statement and Colin.
Yes.
Is it a fair statement that from the content, it was clear that it was the defendant and it was Jeffrey Rapkin?
Yes.
Communicating. Now, on one or more of those 3 photos I'm talking about, here. Curious about where Kathy was when she took a picture of the defendant's cell phone with the defendant's open visible screens with the text message at issue here.
Well, the last text messages that I observed, it appeared her to be holding the phone, and then I could see past cell phone in the background. It looked like her rug on the floor of her bedroom.
And you were able to visually see that rug, and correct?
Yes.
And you knew that from being at the house?
No, I knew that from observing the Ring video that was in her bedroom.
Now,
these are pictures of text messages?
was there multiple text messages, and we'll get into some specific references, but were there multiple text messages where the mom would be talking about turning off Colin's cell phone part of the plan?
Yes.
And that would be specifically related to his number on her plan, correct?
Yes.
Would she make that statement to the defendant sometimes?
Yes.
Would she make that statement to Susan sometimes?
Yes.
And did she make that statement then? And those were like in text message forms, correct?
Yes.
And she also made that statement to her, and Susan made that statement to a Charlotte County Sheriff's Office deputy on the night of the domestic violence battery, when they were explaining that the mom was telling Colin that she was going to be instilling some new parenting and was going to take away his cell phone privilege and his Xbox, correct?
Right. So I've read, yes.
Were there also multiple occasions where she told the defendant through text message and perhaps other forms too, that she was going to be changing his phone service so he could only receive phone calls and text messages?
Yes.
Were there multiple text messages where the mom and the defendant were talking, or the mom and her mom were talking about the defendant's phone service actually being off so that he would have to use Wi-Fi to try to use anything?
Yes.
Were there multiple text messages where the mom told the defendant to give her back the phone that she bought for him?
Yes.
That's the phone that he was using, correct?
Yes.
And that's the phone that was found in the defendant's car, correct?
Correct.
In addition to that, did the mom buy the defendant a MacBook for college courses?
Yes.
And could that MacBook, or was that MacBook mirrored with his cell phone?
You can do that, yes.
And when that happens, what happens?
Your text messages will display in your MacBook like they are in your cell phone.
The defendant at the whole time during this case is a juvenile, correct?
Yes.
And is it a fair statement that it's the mom's responsibility to supervise what he's doing?
Yes.
And it would be common and even encouraged for a mom to monitor and know what their child is looking at or doing on a cell phone?
Very common.
And in fact, the defendant was aware of that, correct?
Yes.
In terms of the mom supervising the defendant in many or all aspects of his life, was the defendant aware of that? I'm talking about the phone specifically, but other, like the Ring camera footage, her parenting him, her providing the phone for him, was the defendant aware of those things?
Yes.
On September 7th and 8th, in the Ring videos in the house, the defendant, he has a cell phone in a black case, correct?
Yes.
Which appears to be the same cell phone in the black case that was found in the defendant's car on September 8th, correct?
It appears to be, yes.
Which appears to be the same cell phone in the same black case in the photographs that Kathy took of the defendant's cell phone when it was open and in her possession, correct?
It appears to be, yeah.
And that has to do with the old knife to the neck from behind text message, correct?
Yes.
And there's approximately 35 pages of a Cellbrite report where the defendant is texting with Jeffrey Rapkin about different subject matter, correct?
Yes.
On pages 3 to 4 of that, the defendant texts to Jeffrey Rapkin, "This is Colin, I am 17, correct?"
Yes. Yes.
And did it appear that the mom actually had the ability and did turn off the defendant's phone and control the service?
Yes.
And when mom had the defendant's phone and it was open, it's quite clear that the phone was open, so she didn't need to do anything, correct?
Correct.
And if it's her phone, she can do whatever she wants with it in terms of getting into it or using it, correct?
Yeah, sure.
From the defendant's phone, did you find a conversation with his mom on September 7th, 2:15 p.m. when she said, "Please return my cell phone and MacBook that were purchased for your education"?
Yes.
On page 1 of the text messages between the defendant and his mom, did the Miss Griffith text him, "I'm turning the phone off"?
Yes.
And I understand you might not remember the pages and whatnot, but
I remember the text message.
Okay, I'm mentioning these page numbers based upon what I saw. On page 4 of 8, did the mom text her son, "Your phone service is disconnected"?
Yes.
On page 8, did the mom text her son, "You have 5 minutes before I deactivate your cell phone"?
Yes.
On page 1 of 29, did mom text the defendant, "I'm turning the phone off after this. Please return my cell phone and MacBook"?
Yes.
And regardless if she was going to follow through with her threats, the defendant obviously.
That statement, because there's a difference between the service and the actual phone.
On page 1 of 29, Kathy texted him, "I can see everything you're doing from your phone. Try calling Detective Lacey again or my mom." Is that correct?
Yes.
On page 14 of 29, the mom again says, "Your phone service is being turned off." Correct?
Yes.
On page 5 of 29, the mom texts her son, "Closing your BOA account." I don't remember if it said BOA or Bank of America.
BOA.
Okay. Indicating that she had joint custody or joint control of his account since he was a minor, correct?
Or access to it.
Or what?
Or access to it, yes.
Access to it, okay. So that's another indication of something she had access to besides his phone?
Yes.
Page, I don't remember if I just said this, but page 14 of 29, your phone service is being turned off.
Yes.
Another statement she
She
made.
said that multiple times.
Okay. Page 16 of 29, "I'm still tracking you and your location, Colin. If I don't see your dot moving on a map towards home," and then whatever else she said.
Yes.
Indicating that she's able to track him through the phone that she so graciously provided.
Yes.
17 of 29, "You are reading each message I send. I keep seeing read next to each text I send. I'm shutting your service off."
Yes.
Page 18 of 29, I'm looking at your phone records, correct?
Yes.
Page 22 of 29, "Your call records with AT&T, you didn't even attempt to call Monique."
Yes.
And then is it a fair statement that Kathy attaches ATT.com screenshot of the records/phone calls for September 6th through September 8th of 2024 that the defendant was either making or not making?
I do remember seeing that, yes.
Page 24 of 29, continuing with the text message conversation between the mom and the defendant. "And you are at your service is disconnected." Do you remember that?
Yes.
Page 23 of Kathy and Susan Detman, her mother. Do you recall Kathy saying, "Colin's phone will not be turned back on given that he lost his phone privilege when he hung up on me"?
Yes.
Coming in the home stretch. Page 29 to 30, the same Cellbrite report. Do you recall mom sending Susan Detman screenshots of the defendant playing video games, kidnapping and killing people?
Yes.
And the mom was monitoring what the defendant was doing in various aspects of his life.
Right.
And is it a fair statement? Didn't she also text the defendant, "I can see what you're doing playing the video games"?
Yes, she said it on the Ring camera as well.
Okay, so that's captured there as well?
Yes.
During your investigation and your interview of Robert Wolantis on page 7 of 16 on one of the two interviews, Robert Wolantis told you Kathy did get Colin a phone. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Page 3 of Amanda Friends' 6-page report, she annotated that the mom took the defendant's phone away, and the defendant also told his dad that his mom took his phone away.
Yes.
Page 3 of 6 of Amanda Friends, former DCF CPI investigators noted or commented that mom took Colin's phone away.
Yeah.
Is it true that the mom would take away the defendant's cell phone and AirPods as punishment for being disrespectful to her?
It appeared that way, yeah.
And from your review of Deputy Alexander Sharp from the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, who he actually testified today, page 4 of 6 in his report, he indicated that the mom told Deputy Sharp she was telling defendant she calls and send/receive texts.
Yes.
Is there any other information or evidence that you have to show about the inquiry of that the mom provided the defendant his cell phone and the defendant was aware of the monitoring that pertains to, obviously the whole relevance of this is the defendant sending Jeffrey Rapkin the text about giving his mom the old knife to the neck from behind routine if she comes up with a gun or something like that.
Right. Just everything we've gone over.
Okay. Judge, I have nothing further for the proffer.
Let's start with the photo of the phone that appears to be the defendant's phone, because it's an iPhone in a black case, right?
Yes.
But you didn't look at a serial number. That's not in the picture, right?
Yeah, through the photograph? No, ma'am.
Right, and there's no other distinguishing marks that indicate that it is the same phone that you collected later that belonged to Colin.
Other than it's very similar in size and the case.
You know how many of those kinds of phones have been sold?
Countless.
Yeah. Okay, so you also mentioned that the phone was obviously open when somebody took a picture of it.
Yes.
But you don't know how it got open, do you?
No, ma'am.
You don't know if Colin was asleep and mom crept in and took the phone from his room to take that picture, right?
No, ma'am.
And you don't know if it was password protected, but she somehow figured out his password against his wishes.
I don't know that, no.
When Kathy texted all these things on September 7th and September 8th about cutting Colin's cell phone service off, she was referring to the AT&T service, correct? At least so far as you know.
Yes, yeah, I would assume, yes.
And Mr. Levine has pointed out throughout the trial that minors cannot open an AT&T account on their own. Are you aware that that's true or not?
From my understanding and experience, yes.
Okay. But does Kathy opening an account for Colin prove that she had allowed access to every personal thing on the phone?
I don't know the circumstances in that household. I can tell you I have the same service with my children, and I do have access to all of their stuff.
Right. And you can agree that some families are more privacy oriented and some are not, right?
I don't know. Based on age, I would say no.
Do you know of any families whose parents don't go through their kids' text messages?
No.
Really?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to testify right now that I never went through my son's text messages.
You can't testify, you're a liar.
At any rate, you said that the photo of the, actually, never mind about that. The text message from Kathy saying, give me the phone and MacBook that I bought for your education back. You have no idea where the funds for those things came from, do you? trust as a result of the probate from Oklahoma, right?
I am aware, yes.
And that was the source of almost everything that Kathy provided for him of substance.
I don't know that.
Okay. You saw text the lawyer in Oklahoma to
Correct.
send money to
Correct.
an account to pay for things, right?
Yes.
Right. Including for the computer that she was supposedly going to buy. They were talking about how much it costed and that they needed to get the money from Shelley.
Yes, ma'am.
So for all you know, that phone was bought with money from Colin's personal trust.
I can't testify to that because I don't know how
And
it was purchased.
And you're aware that Kathy made things up all the time.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yes,
including from the text messages around the same date and time that you were just discussing.
Yeah.
I don't have any other questions.
Yes, just so I can read the text messages which Your Honor has seen at the prior hearing into the record. It's very short. And it will be, if Your Honor rules that. What's that?
You're talking about the actual text from Colin and Mr. Rafkin?
Allegedly.
Yes, Your Honor. I just
I
want
don't
to
need to hear those for purposes of the proffer.
Okay.
The proffer was to determine this preliminary issue.
Okay.
But Ms. Thornhill, it occurs to me in this hearing, we're focusing a lot on who pays for the phone or what are the source of the funds for the phone. The real question, the basic question, is whether your client knew or should have known under these circumstances that what was in his phone will stay in his phone and would not be accessible to anyone. And what I'm looking at here is what appears to be the Griffith household looked like a surveillance state to me, and she was definitely surveilling everything he did, not just actually, but constantly on his back about what he's doing, what he's not doing. A parent has a right, even if the object is purchased by the child and owned by the child, stolen by the child, whatever it is by the child, to examine those items. A child doesn't have that kind of right to privacy. The child has a right to confidential communications with his lawyer.
Right.
But under these circumstances, could I actually say, even if she hacked into his phone, knowing what he knows about his mother, that he had no reason to think she might go snooping in his phone, especially given the animosity is not the right word, but the tumultuous relationship that he had with her. And
Judge, I think there's been any proof one way or the other, and the burden is on the state to overcome the attorney-client privilege, which is presumed. And while I agree, ring cameras in every room, there's something other than these text messages from months later that are not between lawyers and clients saying, I'm watching what you're doing. And then after she said that, and I don't remember if it was this time or another time, he blocked her to prevent her from looking. So that to me says
I
that.
haven't heard about it.
I thought I presented it at the hearing.
Can you really block your parent? They can just take your phone.
Except if he's with.
What legal significance is a child blocking their parent when it comes to the parent's right to inspect the contents of their child's possessions?
But and I don't even concede that there is a right to inspect private communications.
A parent?
Does that?
You don't think I know you've chosen that route. I might be somewhere in the middle, because I do think it's important to let your child have some privacy, but it's also important to know what your child is doing. But the bottom line is, what matters is what the law says. Are you telling me that the law affords a child some right against unreasonable search and seizure by their parent? Just leave attorney-client privilege aside. But I come home with some object that they didn't provide to me, They don't have a right to come in my room, look at it, see what it is, open it up, read it if there's something inside.
Well, Judge, I think that cell phones are innately different. And I don't have the case sites for all of the Supreme Court decisions talking about how uniquely private cell phones are.
Children's cell phones, you have
Children have a right to privacy.
from their parents.
Yes,
Show me
I
the
believe they
case.
do. I don't have one right now.
Oh no. You think she's being truthful that she never checked her kid?
Yeah, okay. Mr. Hendry is dead on, and because he's practiced family law and I haven't, but even in family law cases and custody cases, sometimes parents are actually explicitly banned from looking at communications between their own child and the other parent.
That, Mr. Henry, I think has to do more. I mean, at that point, a court has intervened because there's issue in the best interest of the child. Those orders are typically not put in place unless you have parents who are interfering with the other parent's time sharing and rights to the child. So that's not so much to protect the child per se, it's to protect the relationship between that child and that parent, to prevent the other parent from interfering. That, I don't think that's the same.
But Judge, isn't the relationship between a client and their attorney sacrosanct?
That's the second question. The first question, I mean, it's analogous to talking at the restaurant to your lawyer at a volume where someone else can hear. You knew or should have known someone else would hear that. It's today's version of that. If you're texting under circumstances where you knew or should have known, someone else is going to read that.
And that's where I think we differ. I don't think that Colin knew or should have known his mom would be reading messages between him and his lawyer. No.
I think that is absolutely been shown in this case that is exactly the type of person that she is. But you're telling me there's a case that says a child just blanket has this right to privacy as against their parent.
Not a blanket right. His lawyer was hired by his grandmother to represent him in a case against his mother. So even if she is someone who looks in his phone now and then, Colin had every right to represent him against his mother, that those would be protected. And I don't know how much more simply I can say it. I think we're making a mockery of the attorney-client privilege if you allow this in, but I understand if that's your ruling. I don't think the state.
We had an intercom system in my house when I was a teenager. My mom would turn it on and listen in on me in my room when I had friends in my room with me. She would stand at my door and listen. She would listen in on my phone conversations with my friends. This was how my mother spied on me. No cell phones. And she did that. Now imagine had I had a cell phone. This is what I'm saying. I would have known not to have anything on my cell phone that I didn't want my mom to find out about. This kid knew that his mom had a potential to see anything that was on his cell phone. I'm not disagreeing that he should have had privacy, but he should have also known that his mom could see anything because of how she is. So I agree with the judge on this one, even though I get what his attorney is saying.
To the extent that she could invade, and he should expect that she could invade his.
Well, it's sort of receding from that. Because I think parents have those rights as against their child, even if it's not their property.
Even if she's the victim. So that's like saying.
But that's a double-edged sword. I mean, you have to take this in the context in which it's arisen, which is he lived in a surveillance state with his mother.
Therefore, he doesn't get to have.
No, therefore he gets to walk down the block, take a jog, call his lawyer, where she can't hear it. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, well, we obviously disagree. I don't think this is the same as speaking in a loud voice in a public restaurant. I think that there was an expectation of privacy and privilege that the state has not overcome. But I don't think there's much more argument to be made about it. Sorry.
Under the circumstances where we're operating, where he has no right to make a phone call within his home, but his mother also controls all of his assets and all of his belongings, how is he, I mean, we can set the hypothetical where he goes on a jog and makes a call, but if we're also conceding that mother has the access to turn off his account, how does he ever get a confidential communication if he's a child? If he's stuck inside of his home with his mother controlling every aspect of that life, and then we're to say, well, anything he does inside of that home cannot be confidential because he's in the home and he knows that it can't be confidential, then we just become, it's a circle where we're never allowing Mr. Griffith any privacy.
And he would have to rely on his mother to take him to the office of Mr. Griffith.
And then
He
why
couldn't even call in his room under these circumstances. She had a Ring camera in his room, which would be an invasion of privacy.
agree.
And I didn't realize that there was a Ring camera in his room because I haven't gotten any footage from that. I thought we just had the kitchen and the living room. And the doorbell, sorry. It was clear from one of the body camera footage things that it says something you can tell she has a Ring doorbell.
So, Mr. Levine, what I'm hearing is I'm looking at this with too narrow of a view that what is a child to do in the circumstance where confidential communications with their lawyer either happen at the whim of the parent or not?
They don't judge. Your decision, and obviously you make the decision, but where you were headed and what you were saying makes complete sense. I haven't said a word over here. The more the defense just keeps talking doesn't mean they're making more of a point. You should change where it appears you were going to, because you're supported by the law, you're supported by the facts, the proffer, the law, and what you've been saying it justifies you allowing this to come in. But you're on this side of yourself. The first thing, he wasn't held as a prisoner. This guy went out all the time. He could go wherever he wanted to. He had his phone all the time. His mom, despite all these threats, very seldom did she ever cut his phone off or turn off his service. So he could do whatever he wanted to, whenever he wanted to. It's ironic because on the day when he ended up leaving the house, he was too lazy and disrespectful to do some simple chores because he wanted to go take his walk, which is exactly what he did. So he could have done that at any time. Another thing that I didn't mention, but I did mention at the hearing, is that so I think you're spot on. I think the evidence is spot on. My arguments and the evidence as presented would justify you allowing this in. And to do anything to the contrary would seem to go completely against what your gut instinct and the evidence has shown. Furthermore, one of the things I mentioned at the hearing was, it sounds like, the attorney's making the argument for the defendant. And of course, she has the right and she should do that. But what I said about what I cited, some of the case law and some of the propositions it's what was the defendant's intention and belief about if this is one of many things. This is just another thing that would support you allowing this in. But one of the things is, what is the individual's belief or thought process when they're having a conversation with an attorney? And you have to look at that through the individual, not some educated attorney who's been practicing law for decades and legal arguments and things that they're making and how their mind works as a seasoned attorney. But you have to look at it from the defendant, a 16-year-old who's talking about giving his mom the old knife to the neck from behind, which is how he killed her. When he's having a conversation with Jeffrey Rackett, he's not sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, this is definitely going to be protected as the attorney-client privilege. No one's ever going to see that." He could care less about that. What he was thinking was getting information from his attorney and what he might do, which was he would be happy when he had the chance to kill his mom and set it up, just like he did the same thing with his dad. But when he sent that text, I guarantee you, and I would say the evidence supports this, and it's one of the considerations you should make, that Colin Griffith, the 16-year-old or 17-year-old, wasn't even considering the attorney-client privilege and wasn't thinking this will be protected, nobody will see this.
Maybe
So
he was.
that just goes to
You don't
support
know that.
what your honor should do, which is allow that to come in. There's nothing more humanly possible I can do.
Well, you're
under
asking
these
me,
circumstances.
you're asking me to let it in under crime fraud exception.
No,
And
I-
we've talked about that.
No, I don't. No, I don't. You've already addressed that.
That is much less clear in this case.
That's not what I'm asking to let it in under, because you've already made that ruling. That should said a long time ago.
I mean, it is, I cannot say to a level of, that you've shown to the required level preliminarily that the crime fraud exception applies based on the context in which this lawyer was representing him and what appears to be eerie, and we've all recognized that, appears to be a discussion about what can I do to protect myself.
No, and the way I'm thinking about it, you've already made that ruling last time, so I'm not arguing that today, but what I'm saying is you can and should consider it in terms of when he's making this text to his attorney, he's not thinking, Colin Griffith, the 16 or 17-year-old, is not thinking this will be protected by the attorney-client privilege. I feel safe in doing this. Whereas if Ms. Thornhill or Mr. Henry wrote the same text or a text like that, then their adult, intelligent, educated minds would be thinking about this would be protected. But you have to look at it through the defendant's point of view, and the last thing on his mind was the attorney-client privilege.
Ms. Thornhill, Mr. Henry.
I mean, under that logic, then we're providing less protection to a child for attorney-client privilege because they're less sophisticated and less smart than an adult. That goes contrary to the law. That goes contrary to how we treat children in this justice system. We give them more protection and we give them more leeway. To say that they're not sophisticated enough for an attorney-client privilege it's wrong.
I'm not persuaded by that, but I mean, I think there's probably a lot of adults that's not what goes through their mind when they're talking to their lawyer, and typically lawyers will tell their clients what you tell me is confidential. But Mr. Levine, all right, we're going to take 5 minutes.
All right.
I don't know if it's a whole 5 minutes, but I know I've paused a bunch, so. I feel sorry for this kid. The thing I'm having problems with is that he's killed before.
Losing my voice, so just a moment. All right, we're back on the record. Mr. Griffith is present with both of his lawyers. Mr. Levine is here for the state. there's a bigger question here that I don't know if there's any law on, that occurs to me based on the arguments made by defense, aside from the more specific question of what the defendant knew or should have known. And the question in my mind is, does a parent, in the context of the attorney-client privilege, or just the attorney-client relationship of their child and the child's lawyer, have some obligation to facilitate attorney-client privileged communications? Meaning, yes, let's just assume that he had some expectation of privacy. Well, strike that. You have said, how is he supposed to communicate with his lawyer if mom can take the phone away? I guess my question to you is, does she have to facilitate it? Is that part of my analysis, that children should have a right to use property that their parents would otherwise have every right in the world? I mean, they could bring a locked chest home and the parent could cut the lock off if you ask me to see what's inside. But that's different. Once that relationship has commenced or is in action, the lawyer can prevent that.
Judges, 35
But
pages of text messages for the defendant had no problem communicating. He didn't need any help from anyone over many, many months, kind of proving that he had no problem getting to talk with his attorney or seeing his attorney, and Susan would have taken him there every day of the week.
I think you're missing my question. The communication we're talking about here occurred on a telephone. And so, is that what you're saying, Ms. Thornhill? That I want to get this right, and you're telling me children should be allowed to talk to their lawyers on their phones without having been found to, and imputed knowledge that their parents can get in there and see what they're saying. You're asking me to rule that way.
Yes.
And would that be contrary to the case law that we discussed at the last hearing, and what the court is supposed to analyze in terms of what we were discussing about?
No one showed me a case about a cell phone and a parent's right to look in there even when it, and to use otherwise confidential communications. What would be a confidential communication if you were an adult?
But as it pertains to the defendant having no right to, no thought process that would even be confidential, and the analogy that Your Honor was talking a little bit about today, but we talked much more in depth about at the hearing, about if you send an email on a company computer, even if it has to do with lawyer-client privilege, and I cited a case, I don't remember the case, but I cited a case.
What's different is that person is an adult and has other means of communicating. This person's means of communicating with his lawyer was a cell phone.
He wasn't locked in a cage, Judge. He was at Susan Detman's house all the time. He was using that cell phone as much as he wanted. His mom made a million threats, but never followed through basically on any of them. He's running around enjoying doing his walks. That he was not held captive. He had almost like an adult. He could do whatever he wanted to. He had a driver's license. Susan Detman would take him. All right, fair enough. I didn't remember that. Susan Detman could take him anywhere. And all, like what I was saying about the 35 pages of text messages, time-wise, like he had his phone and was using it anytime he wanted to. So it wasn't like he didn't have the opportunity. And I don't think that inquiry that Your Honor is talking about most recently changes it one way or another, unless there's some case, which none of us have seen the case that would support what the defense is arguing, case law wise. So I think I understand that question might be interesting to Your Honor, but that shouldn't change your mind.
Well, I'm kind of thinking just the hypothetical circumstance. Suppose you have a child who has no other way to talk to their lawyer other than on a cell phone. Well, I think that's the starting point. what do you do in that situation? Does the parent have an obligation to provide a means of confidential communications with their lawyer?
And it's clear that that question could be interesting, and it's definitely interesting to you, and I know you want to make the right decision, but that's not the situation that the defendant was in. And when you analyze that thought that you have, but under the defendant's situation, he's not in a situation like a hypothetical teenager might be.
I appreciate that you think I think certain things are interesting but irrelevant. It's more than interesting to me. It is, I think, the fundamental starting point, and then we break it down from there. You can't answer the question though. Is that correct? Does a parent have an obligation? Does a parent have an obligation to facilitate, not this defendant, just as a matter of general principle, does a parent have an obligation to facilitate confidential communications between their child and their lawyer?
I haven't seen a case that says that, but by the same token, a parent could do or not do anything they want to. So if they want to be a bad parent and just not help their child in any way, shape, or form, there's no law that I'm aware of that would require a parent to get the child an attorney, or to get the child to an attorney's office, or to help the child in any way, shape, or form. As we've seen with a bunch of deadbeat parents who don't do anything, not in this case, but just in general. A parent could sit back and be completely uninterested in their child's life, and that might not be against the law in the context that you're asking about, if they have an obligation or obligation or a legal requirement to help their child have confidential talks with their attorney. So I would say no. I don't believe that there's a legal requirement. I certainly haven't seen a case law, and if there's some legal precedent to the contrary, I would learn something new if that was the case.
You've worked in juvenile. I've never sat in juvenile, but do you know? I mean, I know the parents are, I don't want to say parties down there in criminal cases, but they're always called up to the podium. They're always asked questions, and I think the judge has some jurisdiction over them.
Well, it's the duty of the parents to make sure their child gets to court to deal with any criminal charges or delinquency charges. I don't know that any of our judges have ever punished a parent for not bringing their child to court. So
apparently there was some kind of a trust fund set up for him in Oklahoma, because there was an attorney in Oklahoma that they had to get in touch with to get funds. So I guess it was his money that paid for the actual phone itself, but it's on his mom's phone bill. So the actual phone service his mom was paying for. The phone itself was paid for out of his money that was in trust in Oklahoma. That's the way I understand it, but I could be wrong, but that is the way I understand it right now.
what the child says to me is confidential and protected. The minute
Come on.
I let a third party into that, it waives the privilege. 99 times out of 100, the parent stays in the lobby, and that 90 and that 100, I talk to your client. I mean, to your child. Sorry, I'm getting client and child mixed up. So I don't see how you can recognize that a child does have the attorney-client privilege, the protections that exist.
Well, that's interesting. In that 100th case, then, you are recognizing some superior right of the parent to say, no, you're not going to have confidential communications with my child because you say, hey, I'm not going to talk to your child.
No, what I say, and it doesn't usually last longer than this one visit, I say the case in the way that I need to be effective with you present. I will
So you're not ceding to them. You're just saying, we're not going to do this here.
Yeah. And I also explained to them that I would be happy to answer the questions that I can answer after I've talked with them privately. But I don't know how else other to say it than a child had, well, the case law does, I provided that case that talks about children have the attorney-client privilege. It's not superseded by their parents or somebody saying, we need to know where this child is right now. Attorney, tell us where the child is.
I'm not disputing a child doesn't have the right or the privilege. So can you respond to Mr. Levine's suggestion that, well, we're talking about Colin Griffith,
Right.
who had other means, had a car,
He didn't have a car at that point,
had a grandmother,
who lived in another county.
who he had a relationship with, though, correct? A
Absolutely.
positive relationship.
Absolutely.
And
But if he's got a lawyer who says, I am your lawyer, I work for you, anytime we talk, it's confidential because the lawyer also doesn't know that Kathy maybe is intrusive and hacks accounts and things, and assures Colin.
well, I don't have that evidence of what the lawyer told him.
You don't have a lot of the evidence that Mr. Levine is talking about either, the claims he makes, and yet the privilege exists, and it's their burden to overcome the presumption of that privilege. I don't know how else to answer the question. If Mr. Levine is trying to say that Colin Griffith knew that this was not a privileged conversation, like he specifically did it knowing his mom was
I
gonna look at it,
agree.
I think that's absurd, and he hasn't established that.
I don't know that I would agree under the circumstances I've heard about this relationship that it's he would have no reason to think his mom wouldn't be snooping around. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but Mr. Hendry, you've risen. Do you need to be heard?
A thought occurs that if we're dealing in these hypotheticals, if there was not this screenshot, if they have Colin's phone, Colin is a child, mother has access to this phone, they've done a Cellbrite download of this phone, well, the message exists on the phone. He doesn't have confidential communications because somebody else has access to that device that may have just gotten it in without the mom. I mean,
I think there are some cases that talk about that particular circumstance. I think it's what's in the mind of your client that's important in terms of whether he knew or should have known that another person would have access to it.
But if the access was the same, if mom hadn't actually taken that picture, but he knew that she had access to that phone, even if she hadn't taken that screenshot, would that still not be a confidential communication? Are we saying that anything that happens on those devices for children, they can never be confidential?
Well, that's the question I'm asking.
I just don't think that. I think that's an unreasonable position to take in 2025 when the bulk of communication happens not face to face. There's nothing that supports the state's position that I'm aware of that a phone cannot be confidential. The only thing that seems in this case is that somebody took a screenshot of a device and then sent it to a third party who, if we didn't have this warrant, I mean, it's not like these things, it's not like Ms. Bettman's on the stand right now testifying to this. We are using a detective who accessed this through a Cellbrite download and a search warrant.
It wasn't, I think it's beside the point, but it wasn't a search warrant, it was a consent to search from Susan Devlin herself, but be that here nor there.
But this is still, we are not in a situation where somebody was told something and then that person is on the stand saying, hey, I know this information. This is law enforcement gaining something from a search device. And I think that's different. And I think that this is still, to the extent that the child has, confidential communications, child has a right to privacy, but also there's parents' rights, and it's all kind of murky here. I don't think that this communication has been breached from Colin's perspective.
Okay, wait a minute. It was his mom took a picture of his text message and sent that picture to his grandmother. So this was a consent to search his grandmother's phone is how they found this? Not through Cellbrite? Oh, good Lord, what a tangled web we weave.
And I don't know that Susan or Kathy have the right to breach that on Colin. And that's the ultimate issue here is, did Colin give up his right by putting this communication on his device? Because he didn't give it to anybody else. But somebody went
But the
through
question
that.
question I have is whether he knew or should have known that it wasn't going to be whether he knew or should have known others would have access to it, aka his mother.
That is one of the hugest, of course, inquiries. We're talking mostly about the other thing I mentioned, which I know you said you weren't impressed by, but you still have to consider what was the person's intent when they sent the message from that person's mind. And I would ask yourself, I would ask you to ask yourself, when Colin Griffith sent that text message, was he thinking this is a confidential communication between me and my attorney? And I would submit to you the answer is no. I would submit to you that the other inquiry that we've been talking about, that the evidence that I've presented is evidence to support you ruling this admissible, Your Honor. If your answer is no to the question about whether Colin thought that was a confidential text when he sent it, not now after his damning evidence, and he knows that, oh dang, it's going to be used against him, and his attorneys are obviously bright to know that they don't want this in. It's not how they feel now or how it might look, but when 16-year-old Colin sent that text message, there's no reason that he would be thinking about the attorney-client privilege and that this is protected. So I think those two inquiries are of paramount importance in your analysis.
And it's interesting that Mr. Levine talks about how 16-year-old Colin couldn't have been smart enough to figure out that this was a privileged communication when they turn around and also argue that he's got this mock trial paperwork that's somehow informing him about how to make this whole grand plan to lure his mother to Auburndale. So I think that's ridiculous. I think you start with the presumption that it's a privileged communication. The state has not overcome its burden to establish that Colin did know or should have known that he was not making a confidential communication because his mother might be able to someday look at it.
All right, Mr. Levine, you're recalling this detective.
Yes.
Do we have to do this today?
No,
Because I want to
No, we don't.
make sure there's no cases on this issue and would ask a related issue, analogous issue, other than just the general proposition that a child has the right to the attorney-client privilege. I recognize that. But it is, as Mr. Hendry said, murky when you're talking about parents' rights and children's rights. And just the basic reality, I think that kids know their parents can look in their phones.
Can, but should.
But the question is,
Or would a child say, okay, there are certain things that my parents should look at, like my internet activity, things like that, to make sure I'm not communicating with sex predators or buying drugs or things like that. But when Kathy sees that it's between Colin and his lawyer, why is she looking at that anyway?
Because she realizes that he's going to kill her, and he's talking about how he's going to kill her.
No.
I'm not sure. In any event, you know the issue that concerns me,
Yes.
which is a parent's right.
See the helicopter thing.
Just, I think it's sort of almost an absolute right of a parent to inspect their children's belongings
But once again,
and
Dad,
the right of a child to communicate confidentially with their lawyer, and those two are intersecting here. And then what a reasonable child can do those circumstances when they send a text to their lawyer.
I guarantee he knew. There
I
was a
can't believe that
possibility.
question hasn't been presented to a court before.
I did a lot of research before we even came to the hearing on this. And there are, unless I was using search terms that were incorrect, but I used the 90.50 whatever that talks about the attorney-client privilege and the admissibility or inadmissibility of privileged communications. I did attorney-client privilege with child, juvenile, adolescent. I did it with cell phone, electronic device. I mean, I tried everything to come up with something, and the only things I came up with that were even remotely related were cases that I provided at the hearing. But I'll try again.
There must be some other areas where children's rights versus parents' rights intersect in some more general sense that at least can give us an appropriate framework to talk about.
From an impediment standpoint, this comes up a lot in family law where you have things that are ordered the child to do, and then one parent says no. And then what does that, at what point does the court get to step in and say that's something that we can do something about? So, I mean, that family court is the only area that this really comes up a lot in my
I think
But
we
that's
have to
even
be
slightly
careful of
different.
family court because you're really talking about parents not getting along and then having to figure out what's in the best interest of a child. And when parents disagree on things like privacy for their child.
Right.
Because as you say, you and your family, you've decided your kids are going to get a pretty hefty, serving of privacy. My family, they get kind of a moderate serving.
Detective Peters.
Some families, though, I could see taking the position that you don't have a right to privacy in this house at all. I have the right to come in your room, rifle through your drawers, look through your papers, take your phone to the sheriff's office to see what you've been doing. So.
But I think we have an absence of that here. I realize that there are tons of text messages with her saying she's cutting off his service or I'm tracking him. But that's very different from looking through his communications on his
He's
phone.
got a camera in his bedroom, Miss Thornhill. I think that cuts against that argument. I mean, that is the biggest intrusion on his privacy, if you ask me. So when that's your situation at home, and you've got that cell phone and you're texting about putting a knife in your mom's throat, you shouldn't have thought twice about that in terms of, is mom going to see that?
So now we're putting the burden on a child to go above and beyond what anybody else would be required to do to keep their communications with their attorney privileged.
That's my question. Where does the parent's right intersect? And that's why I asked this question. Does a parent have an obligation to facilitate that? So we're not going to answer it today. I'm going to ask that you save that for when you recall him. I'd like to hear something in the morning, either just point like, yeah, I stayed up all night and found 0, or see something, and I'm going to research this well. Because the question in my mind has changed from what it was initially, which initially it was just ownership and control. I really don't think that matters. I think it's just the child's right to inspect. I mean, the parent's right as against the child's right.
And I will also see it
All right.
I will recognize my limits in my research things.
You have some other line of questioning for the detective for the rest of the day, though?
Well, Judge, and another thing that would go into would be the ring videos, but then those are kind of time consuming. So I don't know if you want to stop now, but I think logistically it would make sense to stop now.
How much footage is there,
Obviously,
time wise?
It's long.
So more than an hour and 15 minutes.
I just don't remember. I can pop it in and answer that, Your Honor. If you can give me 1 minute, I can pull it up and we'll see.
Yeah, we might get through September 7th.
Go ahead and start it. Finish it tomorrow.
September 7th is long.
Don't waste time.
Judge, there's 50 clips, and then each clip.
It's between 30 seconds and 2 minutes.
I mean, we've spent a lot of time doing this. I'd like to sort of catch up a little bit if it's not going to seriously interfere with how you're presenting your case. I'd like to fill up a little more time this afternoon.
Whatever your honor wants.
All right. Does anyone need just a quick bathroom break, anything like that? Madam Court Reporter? All right. Let's have the jury.
Maybe Rob will talk about it on Friday Night Frenzy. I've watched it one time. I can't stay up that late. I forced myself. In fact, I don't think I even stayed to the end that night because I was falling asleep. I couldn't make it. I don't know why he does it so late. I guess that's a good time for him because he's awfully busy. Did he get married yet? Oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I should start doing that. Because I always feel like I'm missing. You know, everybody's always, oh, Rob, Friday Night Frenzy. It's Friday Night Frenzy. Everybody's always so excited. And I'm always like, I have to miss it because I can't stay up that. I can't stay up that late. Same thing with Runkle, but he's on the other coast, so I get why he's always on so late. But Rob's on my side of the country. Man, lawyers and doctors, man, they don't sleep. Nurses get to sleep. When I was young, though, I worked extra all the time.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry for that delay. Mr. Levine?
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Peters, we're going to next segue to September 7th of 2024. We were talking earlier about the Ring video footage. Has an exhibit been prepared that has dozens of clips from that September 7th date, the last day when the defendant was at home with his mom?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move State Exhibit 197 into evidence.
Any objection? Please proceed.
And we'll start playing the clips, Detective Peters. If there's any questions that I have as the clips play, I'll let you know. Starting with number one.
Hold on.
Detective Peters, in clip one, did it appear the defendant was coming home from his job at Domino's Pizza?
It did.
Clip two.
He had a job. Why didn't he pay for his own cell phone? too. Because I cannot. Not anymore. I could stay up 24 hours, man. Basically, I could work 15-hour shift and turn around and come back 6 hours later. Not anymore.
We're gonna go to clip 3.
My husband's phone is $35 a month. Mine's $35.
Detective Peters, in that clip, did it appear that the defendant was holding a cell phone in a black case?
It appeared so.
Next clip.
This is on food. So
Did you not eat your food that I paid good money for? Oh, did you eat it? Okay, good job.
But Travis has.
Oh, and by the way, I stole your candy. I ate the candy that was in your room, some of it. Not all of it, but those little weird things that are like little half-inch squares. There are a bunch of different colors, like green and red and yellow and blue. Those things are pretty good. They said they were sour. They weren't sour at all.
Is that Kathy Griffith?
Yes, it is.
So eating his candy is abusive?
Oh, and Colin, you have to definitely go out there and be watching it. It's longer than ever.
I would eat candy out of my kids' or anything.
I don't think you know how to scout the yard. I think you're like weed whacking it instead of like mowing it. You're using the weed whacker as a mower, dude.
Yeah.
You get that? But I know it's never gonna happen with her.
But see, he could get like the I don't know what they're called. Are they the prepaid? Like Travis has Boost, it's $35 a month. I have Straight Talk. It's $35, but it has like tax, so it's 40 something a month. Like we don't have the family thing where you have to have. I mean, it's like 25. It ends up like $25 a line, but you have to have 4 lines. So it's like $100 a month, like the family plan thing with AT&T. Like, no, we don't have that because there's only 2 of us. We just have he's had Boost forever. He still has his phone number that he had down south when we met. He has the same phone number he's always had. And he's been on Boost forever. And it's $35 a month. And there's like no contract. It's just. Oh, that's right. I keep forgetting that. He was underage. Yeah, so he's pretty much stuck with her. Well, you know, I'm trying to remember because our girls had Boost accounts. And I can't remember if they were under our names or their mom's name. I'll have to figure that out later. Now is not the time.
Was that her wanting her son to weed whack the backyard?
It was.
I'm putting your work shoes in the garage. I don't have time to clean them today, so I'm just gonna have to like dust them off or something. I really don't know. But I'll wash them.
Did it appear that his mom would do his laundry and clean his work clothes and shoes?
It appeared so, yes.
I've been up since 7:30. I'm reading stuff. Finished one of them on Sunday. The book is there. Hold on, I have to let the dog back in. I have to start the laundry sometime soon, but I can't start it until I have the clothes I'm wearing. Yes? Are we canceling Saturday? Has Saturday not started yet? Yes. Do I need to start the clock back over? What? Hold on, I have to put this stuff away. I'm gonna put a bowl on the bottom, which I know. I never put a bowl on the bottom. Yeah, it's all right, Griffith. Your mother is here. I am here.
Is that corner back room where the mom came out of? Is that where the laundry room is?
Yeah, so straight up room where you can even exit the.
Let me close these windows. Yes. I want it to get too lost in you all. Turn this side off. Turn this fan on.
I think that's just her mental health issues. She's got.
Did it appear that the mom did a lot of cleaning and laundry?
It did appear that, yeah.
Oh, and I love you, but in case you'd like to know, my fucking ice maker is broken because of you. You put the goddamn ice cream tub up there. The ice cream tub broke that little gold piece off. There's a gold piece broken inside of my freezer that's supposed to stick into the fucking. But you put ice cream tubs up there and it knocked it off. I've never put ice cream tubs up by the ice maker.
Oh, I love you, but you broke my effing ice cream maker? Is that what she said?
What? What? It's work from anywhere. It's not flammable. No, it's not. They said it's not. My professor said. Sorry, no, that going. What is this nasty? What the fuck is this? Oh, oh, it just worked. I aren't my back anymore. What the fuck? I said those are pulling out better. I was going to come out of broken rail. Rails. I'll get it. No. Oh. Not that light. Hey, it's okay. I'm busy. I'll just sit there, okay? Like, right in it, fine. Like, yeah. I'm actually surprised that I speak on fast. I was going to tell you to hang out with me. So your coins? Yeah. Listen, I use this. My father okay. Those are what you heard from $200. Four of them. What? What do you need? That's gonna take until I go home. No, never mind. Yeah.
It's not gonna take that long. Is it even with this? Yes.
No, fuck I did.
Boring.
So the gutter that I put is gonna fall off, you pull it down, and now you're gonna put something together, and that's studs that's up against the wall. No studs. Not fall off and rip the wall with it. Oh, great. And rip the wall.
But I need the keys to the house. So, you know, put that shit in your car. You need to change your clothes. Well, you're not coming home tonight unless you're like the bad guy, you need to fucking go in your eyes out, telling me not to try your talking to me like this and doing this shit.
You wanna kill someone by putting that thing up your.
It's not gonna
It's
kill
gonna fall
anybody.
down, there's no studs, there's no, you even did it with me, there's no studs.
There are studs, that's why they're
You did
mine.
it with me, there's no studs.
There's studs, that's why they're mine.
I can't even hear what you're saying.
It's easier.
I don't understand why we can't see anything. I get not looking at autopsy photos, but why can't we see anything? It's an overabundance of caution.
Send a text message to Colin Griffith. I put your Starbucks and your sandwich outside because you decided to forget those too, which I paid for this morning. Before you decided to throw your room. So you can come and pick those that are sitting outside the front door.
Detective Peters, what was the subject matter of the argument between Kathy and her son?
It appears to be she was requesting some help hanging something in the home, and he didn't want to do that.
Did she later, after the defendant left the house, did she later put up a bookshelf herself?
I believe so, yes.
Now, it appeared that she was taking food and a drink outside. What can you tell the jury about that?
So he entered the frame with Starbucks and at his portion of the Starbucks outside.
And is this the clip in which the defendant leaves and doesn't return to the house?
Yes.
She was holding a phone and she said, send a text to Colin or something like that. And then she spoke the words that she spoke. Did that text message then show up in the text messages?
It did in Colin Griffith's phone. It did.
All right, continue.
I started going through his room. It was a complete and total fucking mess. He had shit everywhere. Okay? He didn't even go to sleep last night until 1 o'clock in the morning. I was asleep by 8. I was fucking out. I took my youngest. I was asleep before he even got home. I had dinner for him waiting that I had bought for him at a fucking Mexican restaurant that delivered. And he still decides that this morning when I was like, hey, we need to get this last bookshelf up so I can get everything going. He said, no, Mom, that's just gonna fall on somebody's head and kill them. It's 7:30. Where have you been? I didn't say that to him. I said to him, I said, Colin, you know what? You have a great life. The fact that you don't even do your own sheets, you don't even clean your own bathroom. All of the things that I've told him to do for a wife, he doesn't fucking do. And he just looks at me, right? And he wants to live on his own. And he thinks he's able to live on his own. Mom, I have cockroaches coming into my house because Colin leaves candy and food in his room. Just leaves it in his room. Out. No, and I told him that. I even said, because I showed you how I had everything in those little containers, those glass containers or the plastic ones that seal everything. I said, you can have candy in your room if it's this, because they can't get into that. And then like last night, there was an ant on the doorknob. He hadn't going from the house to the garage on that doorknob. I could tell, and then I looked, he hadn't closed the back door all the way, the back sliding glass door. And there were ants. He's like, Mom, everybody has ants in their house. I said, Mom, nobody has ants in their house. Nobody has cockroaches in their house. And the first time you see them, you kill them, and then you start spraying their whole house with bug spray. Because once you see one Starbucks with his drink he drank, he was mad that I was making him go with me, like, stand here with me.
I really don't want
I mounted to a
to talk about bugs. They're yesterday.
And he didn't want to stand there and hold it. He said, no, this is going to take 2 or 3 hours. There's not any studs back there. I said, I've already shown you where the studs are. I marked them, Colin. I said, why else do you think I put 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 areas this thing is being. It's not going to hold books. It's going to hold pictures. It's not going to fall on anybody's fucking head. Even though he went to school, he didn't get his shit figured out with his math class like I told him to. He was like, no, my computer's gonna die October 12th. My professor said it's fine, and I didn't do the proctorial. And I was like, you can hook up a webcam to that computer. The fact that you haven't figured out how to do that is not my fault. And I'm not gonna sit here and do it for you because I'm not gonna do your college work. And so he's mad at me that I'm not doing his college work, but he doesn't want to help with this. I'm not talking to anybody because I'll just get upset. No, he doesn't.
Who is she talking to?
I get served.
Oh, is she talking to that detective that was on the stand, the female? Zan, whatever her name was.
Can't. He's 17. They won't give him one. You can buy a prepaid one. He knows how to do that. I love you. Okay, I love you, and I'm telling you right now. I already told Colin. I said, you leave, you do this, I'm cutting everybody off. I'm changing my phone number. So I'm changing my phone number. I'm cutting everybody else off because I'm fucking sick and tired of this. This is bullshit. This is fucking bullshit. I try to let him sleep in, try to be the nice mom, try to do everything. Had my identity stolen. I've had all this shit going on. My own, and he can just fuck himself with his little AT&T phone and figure out what the fuck to do with life. He has a trust fund. He has a lawyer. He can figure that out. What's he gonna do? Call DCFS and say that I kicked him out? Okay.
You're supposed to teach your kids.
There's a brand new car he's driving around.
You're supposed to teach your kids how to maneuver life. You don't just hand them everything they want and then expect them to do everything. You teach them how life works. And that's not how life works. You don't just hand them everything and then say, oh, now you have to work. No, you have to teach them how to earn things. See, that's another thing that controlling parents do. And I know this from experience. They don't teach because they want you to stay dependent. I didn't know how to wash clothes when my mom died, or cook, or do anything. My dad had to teach me all that after my mom died. Oh, wow. I didn't know how to do anything when my mom died. My dad had to teach me everything after. Because he worked full time. He didn't know I didn't know. So that is 100% a controlling mom thing. So it's not the kid's fault when the parents do that. I mean, a lot of people, you can blame the kids all you want, but it's not. It's that controlling moms don't self-sufficient because they don't want them to be self-sufficient. Oh, that's cool. My home ec didn't have laundry. They barely had cooking. I learned to sew, but I don't remember how to do that now. I learned stuff about makeup, which is useless if you ask me. I do remember stuff about how to measure for cooking, like leveling teaspoons and that stuff, but yeah, friend moms are bad too. That's what I tried to do with my stepdaughters. That was a big mistake. But I did a reset. I shut them out for a couple years, and now they respect me a little bit more now. They ask permission before they just come in and bust into my house or invite themselves along places. That used to drive me crazy. Oh, when are we going? No, there's no we. It's me. I'm going. That never worked. Oh, no, I'll go with you. Oh, yeah, I remember. Only I remember there being washing machines in the class, but we didn't do the washing. They did the washing. I think we had to put them in the washer, but we didn't start the washer. I guess there weren't enough to do a full load after our class because it was a really small pool. I graduated. My graduating class was 46 people. I learned parliamentary procedure in home ec. I don't know what that has to do with home ec. And I actually went to a parliamentary procedure competition. Yeah, I'm a nerd, but you guys already knew that. I was on the haiku team too. This is driving me crazy because all I hear is noise. We can't see a darn thing. And we have no context for these noises that we're hearing. It's just bizarre. Oh, that's cool. That's a good idea. That's something else that should be taught in school a lot more. I know how to balance a checkbook. I just don't have the ability to do it. No, I do. I just am too lazy to do it. It's hard now with all like automatic withdrawals and stuff for my streaming services and that kind of stuff. I just wasn't as lazy as I am. I need to go through and figure out what dates everything comes out and try to figure it out. Yeah, that's one of the things my parents never did. They never said, "Well, if you get good grades, I'll give you, like $10 for every A or whatever." Like some of my friends, they got that, and I was like, "Why?" The reward is the good grade itself. I got the opposite. I got when I was little. When I got older, they quit doing it because my dad said if she can't get the good grades, she can't get the good grades. But I got spanked for bad grades. And then one day, Daddy was like, "No, I'm done. If she can't do it, she can't do it." But I had ADHD. I developed my dad, and I don't think my parents thought there was anything wrong with me. I've never been treated for it or anything. They thought I was just bored. For vegetables, like because he wouldn't eat his vegetables. Oh man, I never got bribed like that to do anything. Mine was always punishment if I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I got negative reinforcement. I never got positive reinforcement. Well, I take that back. I got some. I got positive reinforcement for stupid stuff. I got positive reinforcement when I was sick. And I sometimes think that's why I'm sick all the time now. I mean, I know I can't help being sick. Sick is out of my control. But sometimes I just think if I was giving me something every time we got sick, I wouldn't be sick all the time now. I did. I got a present or a special meal or something every time I got sick when I was a kid. And that was before I started with the chronic illnesses and stuff. I'm just talking like a cold or a fever or, normal kid stuff. If it was close to Christmas, I'd even get a Christmas present early sometimes. But if it was something I was supposed to do, I got negative reinforcement if I didn't do it. I didn't get any extra incentive to do it. Oh, yeah, that sucks. Yeah, my dad was a cop, so I didn't know anything either because my friends never told me anything or let me like. There were where I grew up. It's like the next town over. It's like 15, 20 minutes from here. There were these like stable sinkholes everywhere, and they were very, very close to my house. And the kids would drive down in there and party. And I knew where they were. And I knew that the kids went out there and partied. I was never invited though, because they would smoke weed and whatever. And my dad was a cop. So I wasn't invited. And so I never got in trouble because I never knew where. And the parties rotated between the sinkholes. So I never knew where they were at any given time, and I didn't know how to get a hold of any stuff because if they did tell me, they were afraid that I would tell my dad they knew how my mom was too, because they knew back when they did invite me, I would ask my mom. Half the time, mom would say no, I couldn't go. So they knew about my mom too, so they were afraid. They knew that somebody would come looking for me or whatever, and then they'd get caught. So I just stayed at home. I made a lot of babysitting money. Seriously, what are we watching? The most boring thing ever. We're just watching the reaction to the court. We have no idea what's going on. We're just hearing noises. Edward Scissorhand noises. For crying out loud. This is ridiculous. And this is the feed is the pool feed, right? So everybody has the same feed. So it's not like you can change to a different feed and actually see what everybody's seeing. wish I had a place to stay down there and I could drive down there. It's only a couple hours. I've been in that courtroom before. I mean, courthouse before. I was at a child support hearing in that courthouse when we first got married.
Out. Cassie. Okay. Out. Out.
Some more shocking and gripping testimony, huh, Judy? Is the jury still awake? At least they didn't see it.
No. No.
Who's she yelling no to?
Your Honor, I have no further questions regarding this subject matter for today.
Judge, we discussed previously that Detective Peters is going to be coming back, and I will reserve my cross-examination for when he's finished with his direct and total.
Very good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to end here for today. It's about 4:15. Please may know, time to do the chairs.
All rise, please. Baby Steven.
Anything before we break for the evening?
No, you're-
Yes, sir. All right, I'll see you at 8:30.
Okay, guys, 9 o'clock in the morning, and I am over halfway done with my St. Patrick's Day gnome. Yay. Quit taking notes because you can't take notes on just a bunch of noise and you can't see what's going on. So I gave up. Okay, 9 o'clock in the morning. I will see you guys then. Thanks for watching with me again. Bye.